June 6, 1944, 00:15 hours. Strong point WN62, Omaha Beach. Gerrit Hinrich Sevelo sat inside the concrete bunker overlooking the dark English Channel and carefully cleaned the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun. The ritual was almost comforting. Oil, cloth, steel. Outside, the night was calm, the sea invisible beyond the embrasure. In his uniform pocket, folded and unfolded so many times it was already soft, was a letter from his girlfriend back home in Metzingen. She promised she would wait for him until the war ended in victory. Germany would win. They all believed that. 3 days earlier, Sevelo had written back with confidence that now feels chilling in hindsight. The invasion will be their grave. We will throw them back into the sea within hours. Those words had not been bravado pulled from thin air. Just days before, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel himself, the Desert Fox, had inspected their positions. Rommel had leaned forward, peered through the machine gun aperture, studied the overlapping fields of fire covering Omaha Beach, and nodded. "When they come," he had said, "this beach will be their cemetery." Now, in the early minutes of June 6th, nothing moved. The Channel lay silent. The Atlantic Wall, stretching from Norway to the Spanish border, stood like a monument to German confidence. Propaganda called it the greatest defensive line in history, and on paper it almost seemed believable. Along the Normandy coast alone, German engineers had poured more than 17 million cubic meters of concrete and used over 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had declared the wall impregnable. At Omaha Beach, the defenses appeared especially formidable. According to U.S. Army Center of Military History records, the Germans had constructed 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery positions, 18 anti-tank gun positions, 45 rocket launcher sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. The beach had been transformed into a killing ground. More than 3,700 obstacles littered the tidal zone: Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes, many topped with teller mines. Behind the beach, millions of landmines waited. Rommel had wanted 60 million. He received far fewer, but still enough to kill in terrifying numbers. German planners believed in mathematics. Colonel Ernst Goth of the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux calculated that his 4 artillery batteries alone could deliver 120 rounds per minute into the beach sectors. Combined with neighboring units, the defenders could concentrate crushing firepower on any landing attempt. These calculations, however, rested on one fatal assumption: unlimited ammunition. No one imagined a battle so vast that those neat equations would collapse within hours. The weather seemed to confirm German confidence. June 5th had brought winds of 20 to 25 knots. Waves reached 6 feet. Clouds hung low, barely 500 feet above the sea. Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stuve, working from Paris with data from U-boats and coastal weather stations, assured High Command that these conditions would persist for at least 2 more weeks. An invasion, he insisted, was impossible. Senior officers believed him. Rommel left his command on June 5th to return to Germany for his wife's birthday, carrying a pair of gray suede shoes he had bought in Paris. General Diedrich Dollmann, commander of 7th Army, ordered division commanders to attend war games in Rennes. Naval patrols sweeping the Channel were canceled because of the rough seas. The weather forecast became the first German miscalculation of D-Day. What Stuve did not know was that the Allies possessed weather stations in Greenland and flew reconnaissance missions over the Atlantic. They detected a brief break in the storm, a narrow 36-hour window. Group Captain James Stagg identified it. Eisenhower seized it. At 23:15 on June 5th, radar stations along the Norman coast began detecting unusual activity. Freya and Würzburg radar sets picked up large aerial formations approaching from the north. Operators were not alarmed at first. Allied deception raids were common. But by 0030 on June 6th, reports arrived that shattered assumptions. Paratroopers were landing across Normandy. The reports were chaotic. Some units reported landings to the east, others to the west. Some said the paratroopers were British, others American. Dummy paratroopers with firecrackers, part of Operations Titanic and Glimmer, added to the confusion. The German command system, rigid and centralized, struggled to interpret the flood of contradictory information. Major Hans von Luck of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, 21st Panzer Division near Bayeux, grasped the danger immediately. Awakened by reports of landings near his sector, he requested permission to attack at once. The reply from division headquarters was short and disastrous. Do not move until the situation clarifies. Von Luck would later write, I knew at that moment we were lost. The paratroopers were clearly marking the flanks for a landing. Every minute we waited gave them time to consolidate. Yet we sat paralyzed by our own command structure. At 5:30, as gray light crept over the horizon, German observers saw something their training had never prepared them for. From horizon to horizon, the sea was covered with ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, transports, landing craft, spreading across the channel like a steel tide. According to official Allied records, the invasion fleet consisted of 6,939 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 auxiliary vessels, and 864 merchant ships. It was the largest naval armada ever assembled. To defenders raised on propaganda about Allied weakness, the sight was psychologically devastating. One artillery officer at WN-62 reportedly told his men they were witnessing the whole world arriving at their doorstep. At 5:35, the naval bombardment began. Nothing in German experience, not the Eastern Front, not the heaviest RAF bombing raids, prepared them for what followed. The battleship USS Texas fired hundreds of 14-inch shells at German positions near Pointe du Hoc. HMS Warspite unleashed its own massive guns, firing dozens of 15-inch shells. Destroyers crept dangerously close to shore, firing point-blank into visible bunkers. German veterans later recalled that concrete fortifications designed to withstand anything simply cracked. Men were buried alive, dug out, and buried again as shells continued to fall. The psychological shock was as severe as the physical destruction. These bunkers, their last refuge, were crumbling. The Luftwaffe response revealed the full scale of German weakness. Oberst Josef Pips Priller of Jagdgeschwader 26 received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His reply, recorded later, was bleakly honest. What entire force? I have 2 planes. On D-Day, the Luftwaffe managed only about 300 sorties against more than 14,000 flown by the Allies. Priller and his wingman made the only notable Luftwaffe attack on the beaches that morning, strafing Sword Beach once before fleeing Allied fighters. 2 aircraft against an armada. It became a symbol of German impotence. At 06:30, the first assault waves hit the beaches. Despite the bombardment, German survivors manned their weapons. At 06:35, Severlo began firing from WN-62. His position, one of the few still intact, commanded devastating fields of fire across Omaha Beach. In his post-war memoir, he claimed to have fired approximately 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. He later claimed to have inflicted over 1,000 casualties, a number historians consider impossible, given that total American casualties at Omaha from all causes were about 2,400. What is not disputed is that his MG-42 contributed to the horror that earned Omaha its name, Bloody Omaha. What followed shocked even seasoned soldiers. Americans fell in rows, landing craft burned, bodies floated in the surf. Yet, no matter how many men were killed, more came. Every destroyed landing craft was replaced by 3 more. Every silenced German gun drew overwhelming naval fire. By midday, German units reported critical ammunition shortages. Defensive plans assumed limited assaults. No one had planned for this. Artillery units that had ammunition for days exhausted it in hours. By afternoon, some German batteries were rationed to a handful of shells per gun per day. The contrast with Allied firepower was brutal. German observers noted that American destroyers fired hundreds of shells at single targets, while German guns fell silent. Roads bringing up reserves were under constant air attack. Ammunition could not move. Fuel could not move. Nothing could move. The armored reserve Rommel had insisted was essential remained frozen. The 21st Panzer Division did not receive orders to attack until 10 a.m., 4 hours too late. When it finally advanced in the afternoon, it reached the coast near Sword Beach, the only German armored unit to do so on D-Day. But that evening, hundreds of Allied gliders descended in Operation Mallard, reinforcing the British 6th Airborne Division. Interpreting this as a major threat, the panzer units withdrew. They lost about a quarter of their strength in a single day. Throughout Normandy, German units faced airborne forces on a scale they had never imagined. British 6th Airborne and American 82nd and 101st Airborne divisions created chaos far beyond their numbers. German paratroop veteran Friedrich von der Heydt later admitted the truth. They dropped divisions, we dropped battalions. They were supplied endlessly, we were not. As D-Day wore on, German command and control collapsed. Aircraft cut communications. French resistance fighters sabotaged telephone lines. Radio traffic was jammed. By noon, entire divisions vanished from the command net. Unit commanders fought blindly, isolated from any larger picture. By nightfall, the truth was unavoidable. The Atlantic Wall had been breached. The Luftwaffe was absent. Coastal divisions reported catastrophic losses. One division reported combat strength reduced to 35% in a single day. German attempts to counterattack during the night failed immediately. Movements were detected, illuminated by flares, and annihilated by naval gunfire. It was like daylight, one officer wrote. We lost half our strength without seeing a single enemy. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements poured in. Artificial mulberry harbors were assembled, supply ships anchored in organized rows. What had begun as an invasion was becoming a permanent presence. German reinforcements attempting to reach Normandy were destroyed en route. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, took 17 days to travel what should have taken 3, losing 30% of its vehicles to air attack before reaching combat. By mid-June, German forces were nearing psychological collapse. Carentan fell, linking Utah and Omaha. Elite paratroop units withdrew in disorder. Commanders reported their units no longer existed as fighting forces. Isolated German tactical successes, like Michael Wittmann's famous attack at Villers-Bocage, changed nothing. British losses were replaced within hours. German losses were permanent. Wittmann himself was killed weeks later. Skill could not defeat arithmetic. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th delivered another blow. Fortified for years, it fell in days. Its commander later explained resistance had become meaningless against unlimited resources. Operation Cobra in late July annihilated what remained of German forces in Normandy. Thousands of tons of bombs shattered entire divisions. Survivors were psychologically broken. Even American generals were killed by the intensity of their own firepower. The Falaise pocket sealed the disaster. Tens of thousands were killed or captured. Roads were littered with dead horses and burning vehicles. Many German soldiers surrendered simply to survive. By the end of August, German losses in Normandy reached roughly 320,000 men. Nearly all armor in France was destroyed. Allied losses, though heavy, were replaced daily.
German officers understood the truth. Normandy was not lost because of cowardice or incompetence. It was lost because modern war had become industrial. Courage meant nothing against assembly lines. Rommel himself admitted it before being wounded. "The unequal struggle is nearing its end," he wrote. "The enemy's overwhelming superiority in men and material is beginning to tell." Severlo survived. He spent the rest of his life haunted. He later wrote, "My 13,500 rounds meant nothing. They had unlimited replacements." D-Day, from the German perspective, was not just defeat, it was a revelation. They believed in destiny, ideology, and racial superiority. What they faced was something else entirely, the arsenal of democracy. They began June 6th convinced they would throw the invaders into the sea. They ended it watching an endless tide roll ashore, realizing the future of war no longer belonged to courage alone, but to factories, logistics, and production. They fired until their barrels warped, fought until their ammunition vanished, and watched as the Allies simply brought more of everything. The mathematics of modern war had rendered their bravery irrelevant.